Well, welcome, everyone. Welcome to Advancing Our Church, a Changing Our World podcast about Catholic stewardship, leadership, and advancement. So glad to have you all back here today in our midsummer edition here. And today we're going to talk about planned giving. And we have a wonderful guest, Renée Underwood. And I'm going to offer a little introduction to Renée, and we're going to get right down into it, okay? Renée Underwood is a certified fundraising executive and has served in stewardship, development, and Catholic Foundation management roles for dioceses since 2009. As Chief Development Officer for the Diocese of Fort Worth Advancement Foundation, she has responsibility for annual and planned giving, endowment funds, and capital campaigns. As the current Region 10 board representative to the International Catholic Stewardship Council, Renée has extensive board experience for nonprofit organizations. She currently serves on the executive committees of the Lone Star Council Charitable Gift Planners, Fort Worth Metro Chapter of Association of Fundraising Professionals, the AFP, Fort Worth Sarah Club, and the Southwestern Lieutenancy of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. Prior to her nonprofit career, Renée served in advertising, marketing, and executive management roles. She holds a bachelor's degree from Texas Tech University, an MBA from the University of Texas at Dallas, and has completed additional graduate studies toward a master's in pastoral studies from Loyola University in New Orleans. Renée is a widow, a mother of 2 sons, a grandmother of 3, and a spiritual director. Welcome, Renée. So glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that, Jim.
What a wonderful background you have, Renée. What led you from the for-profit world into a life of development and fundraising, especially for the church?
Well, it was kind of a natural evolution. You look back now with 2020 hindsight and say, God definitely sent me where I wanted to be. And our advancement foundation here in Fort Worth is composed of a lot of individuals like that, people who were very successful, CFO of Zale Corporation, people who managed family hedge funds. And they hit this point and they go, I want to do something mission oriented. In my particular case, my for-profit career was primarily advertising and marketing kind of roles. First on the ad agency side, then on the client side. But throughout all of that, I always was a volunteer, very involved in volunteer, not just for the Catholic Church, but for a number of organizations. And when you work with nonprofits and you get about a mission, you learn the tricks and trades and tools of development. It's rare that you find yourself on a nonprofit board if they're not wanting, your work, your wisdom, and your wealth. And they also ask you to ask other people for money. So I was living in Lubbock at the time, heard an opportunity that the bishop, who I knew very well, had. He was seeking a director of stewardship and development in that diocese back in 2009.
Okay.
And it culminated at a time when I felt like the Holy Spirit was saying to me, Renée, are you using your gifts and talents the way I wanted you to? And I'm sure that's not really how we meant it.
I'm sure he did.
One thing led to another. And within a few short months, I went to see the bishop. I said, tell me about this job opportunity. I said, I really don't want to do it unless it's ministry. He said, oh, it absolutely is ministry.
Yeah.
And so I go, well, I've never done development work for pay, but I'm sure I could do it. And that was in 2009. And now, moved from that diocese now to the much larger diocese of Fort Worth. And it has just been a blessing. And I'm just so grateful that my career shifted this way.
Well, you hit on so many great topics there, and not to go too far off of our planned conversation today, but development as a ministry. And I know you understand what that means, especially with your involvement with the ICSC and just meeting other like-minded individuals like ourselves, our colleagues who work in development, Catholic fundraising all over the country. It really is a ministry, isn't it?
I would agree with you, Jim. I think a lot of people who don't do what we do and see from the outside in, and they think fundraising, they think development, and they get in this transactional mode.
Yeah.
But it's truly is stewardship. It's on a discipleship call. And whether or not my church has a roof that needs to be replaced, or whether they are totally debt free and have no current needs, I still, as a Catholic, have an obligation to give out of my gratitude to a good and gracious God who cannot be outdone in generosity.
Absolutely.
So
And
really, first and foremost, I feel like my role is stewardship and teaching and preaching stewardship everywhere I can go. And fortunately, I'm able to meet a lot of people who are living that kind of a life already.
and what a great blessing it is. I saw you're taking some classes in pastoral studies at Loyola. That must really complement your work as well, huh?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's one thing to volunteer in the church and be real involved in your church. It's a whole different transition to suddenly work in the church
Yep.
and get into the depth of, you know, all the Vatican documents and canon law and you know, the unique works of the church as quote unquote an industry, if you will.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of continuing ed, which fortunately I continue to do that. I'm a lifelong learner. And
Mhm.
so I hear about an opportunity, and fortunately Zoom and COVID have allowed for a lot more virtual training. And so I'm always learning more and more about my faith and about the church, and certainly about my chosen career path, development best practices.
I couldn't agree more. You may or may not know, I'm in the diaconate program, and part of that is we're getting a master's in pastoral studies. And I just find, you know, aside from obviously the formation piece of the diaconate program, just learning more about my faith and understanding the church documents has helped me to be a better writer for development programs, a better explainer, a better teacher in those areas, just understanding the documents, understanding our faith, understanding the theology behind it. It's definitely a worthwhile pursuit, no matter what, you know, avenue of Catholic philanthropy, Catholic stewardship you're pursuing.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And congratulations for taking the plunge and for your service as a deacon. I tell you that I hold our permanent deacons in high esteem. They got me through a lot of serious issues and in past times of my life, and it truly is a lay down your life ministry, and you're to be credited for embarking on that journey.
Well, me and my brothers have about 2 more years, God willing. So keep us in your prayers. I appreciate that.
We will do that.
So we're going to talk about planned giving, and I know you have a lot of great stories to share and some great experience in the Diocese of Fort Worth. But I thought I might just start by laying the groundwork a little bit on the landscape nationally. As we all know, the numbers came out last month for Giving USA, and just to kind of go through it real quick. Giving by bequest grew 28.9% in inflation-adjusted dollars between 2019 and 2020, but this was immediately followed by a decline, an 11.4% decline in inflation-adjusted bequests having been given from 2020 to 2021. Having a little bit of research on that, it was interesting how some of the experts were saying that the numbers can be so skewed, obviously, and we know this in philanthropy, by one or two gifts that just, you know, grew it tremendously between 2019 and 2020 for that giant leap of 28%. The cumulative change in giving in bequest over the past 3 years is 14.2% increase with adjusted dollars for inflation. Just historically, it's Giving USA, the nonprofit Times, I should say, reported that bequest is a rather volatile area, again, because of the big shifts between one or two large gifts can shift the entire piece. And in 2020, there were some extremely wealthy bequests out there that caused an enormous growth. And that's just a tremendous credit, obviously, to those development officers that worked with those donors. But on a whole, the field of bequests continues to grow. The opportunities continue to grow, and more of our colleagues in the Catholic development space are moving forward and doing new ventures and new programs and planned giving for their diocese. So how does your experience, Renee, in the Diocese of Fort Worth compare to some of these national trends?
Okay, so I know you made the comment that one or two big gifts can skew it. But
Sure.
numbers aside, here's the reality. The baby boomers, that I'm in that generation, everybody knows the baby boomers have disrupted everything throughout their entire lifetimes. And from whether we had to build more schools to accommodate them, to more universities to accommodate them as they aged, more hospitals. And that generation, as they're aging and passing on, they are making, they're different than their parents, just as they always have been. And we are, for the next probably 30 years, looking at the single biggest passing of wealth from one generation to another. And so my take is that this is fertile ground, and that every parish, every diocese, every Catholic foundation better be in it in some way, because most, one of the things I look at is I see obituaries throughout our diocese. I always look at them and see where the family wants memorials to go, for example. And it's often their college or the American Cancer Society or a local hospice or something. And we hear more and more in our work in Catholic philanthropy, the main reason the Catholic Church and our parishes and schools do not get remembered is because we don't ask the way those other organizations do. So I'm a champion for, if you're doing a little bit, doing more. If you're doing nothing, do something. If you're doing a lot, expand it, because the benefits only grow. Here in the Diocese of Fort Worth, easily, we probably are working on true closures, paperwork signatures of at least 3 different plan gifts a week. That may be a small estimate. It's also very difficult to quantify, but it is because of these seeds, whether it be email signatures, bulletin announcements, all the kind of resources we make available for our parishes, telling the stories of those people who choose to make a planned gift. That's a big part of our strategy here, is when we do get someone to commit, and we know we don't talk amounts, we talk about their decision and the way they chose to do it. Say, was that quick and painless? Were we nice to work with? And they'll say yeah, and say, well, want to just run something by you? Would you let us tell your story? And almost everybody is very willing to do it. While they're humble, selfless people, they recognize that by their example, others may also be called to do the same. And that's a big part of our effort, is celebrate them through, we have a legacy society in the diocese, but also share the stories, because people are bright and they connect the dots and they go, oh, people like, I'm not so different from them. They go to my parish, or I know where they worked, or, I was a school teacher too. It's not billionaires and gazillionaires who are making planned gifts. It's ordinary folks. And that's a big part of what we've got to get, that myth of, sometimes the word estate and bequest, that sounds real fancy. And we need to be more inclusive in the language that we work with.
Mm-hmm. How does your foundation kind of have a list of prospects that they're working on for planned giving, or how do you identify, those who might be ready to move into that kind of conversation?
Well, we're fortunate here. We run the annual appeal for the diocese. We also do all the gift fulfillment on every major capital campaign, every commitment card, every pledge card, for just about anything you
That's
can
great.
get in a parish in the Diocese of Fort Worth. I'm interested in making provisions, and so we get a lot of feedback from those comment cards, a lot of calls from that. We do provide a lot of resource materials for our parishes.
Yeah.
And you never know, are they using it, are they not? But every time I get a call or one of my gift officers receives a call, we always say, tell me how you heard about me. How did you get to reaching out to me? And the majority of it is I saw something in my parish, a bulletin or on my parish website or whatever. And that's how they knew to get to the Advancement Foundation. And we, as the foundation here in Fort Worth, we provide this service to the parish because all they really need to do is promote and encourage. And then we'll follow up with the conversations and the details and the paperwork. And it matters not to us if they don't want 100% of their estate proceeds to benefit the parish and none to the diocese. We don't really mind. Our role is plan gifts for the good of the church in the 28 counties in North Central Texas.
Sure. And your foundation you had mentioned you handle all the pledge redemption for your parishes for the campaigns, which is great. Are you essentially a full service foundation providing all those kinds of development, or most of those?
Like development support, we do development support for school development directors. We have a coordinator. We run monthly forums for them. We try to help our development people and stewardship people in the parishes be better at what they do, because in the end it benefits all the broader church. And so we're very much involved in that. And because of that, we get to know a lot of our parishioners. As a matter of fact, this afternoon I'm heading new fairly large parish is about to launch a capital campaign, and I'm meeting with them early to let them know what consulting services they'll provide for them on their capital campaign and how they would do that. Well, I'm going to be sitting in a room with 12 people, many of them prospective donors to other things in the diocese. You know, it's a great way that we operate here.
It's wonderful that you're connected also to the Catholic schools in your diocese. Do you find a lot of planned giving or planned gifts coming out of the Catholic schools?
That has really grown in the last 2 years a lot, because I've done Endowment 101 webinars with my school development people. I've walked with them through assisting them on planned gifts, and kind of each little win you have in a parish or school, you go, I get this. Okay, it's not so hard. And then they're more comfortable talking about it. And before you know it, one story leads to another. And I've got one little Catholic school in Arlington right now. They're just fertile ground on new endowments and new planned gifts for their little school. And it's just because they're championing the idea. It's paying off.
From the diocesan perspective, you mentioned endowments, which is obviously one of the, like, as you know, one of the more natural places for a planned gift to flow. But do you find that more of your planned gifts flow to endowments, or are they unrestricted, or do you see kind of a distribution where donors really want to dedicate their bequests?
Well, usually the call starts with, I need the bequest language. But then they realize that's not as, yeah, you can do it in a simple sentence. It leads to, they say, well, I'd really like so much for operations at this parish and so much for this, and I want it to benefit tuition assistance for kids from this neighborhood. They start getting complicated. And that's when I first throw out the suggestion, are you possibly in a position now to set up an endowment that spells out all those restrictions, and then your bequest or your beneficiary designation can be to the XYZ endowment. And as soon as they learn that opportunity, I'd say 90% of the people we work with, they say, oh yeah, let me fund that endowment now. You know, we have a minimum, and ours is a small minimum. Compared to a lot of dioceses, $10,000 will name and open an endowment, and it can start earning money. And then their will or their life insurance policy or whatever else directs to the endowment fund.
Sure. That's great. I think a lot of development directors that I've spoke to over the years, there's the desire to get involved with planned giving, but I think there can be this fear that, well, I may not exactly understand how to set up a charitable lead trust, or I don't necessarily understand all the language of the ins and outs of some of these kinds of formal vehicles that donors would want to set up. I've always encouraged them. You just gotta. That's why you have financial advisors. That's why you have partners that you work with. What is your advice on that?
I feel the exact same way. I mean, obviously, I went for my CFRE credential to learn more about the planned giving realm, and I've learned a lot just simply from encountering different types of gifts. But I've got to tell you, when the structures start getting really, really complicated, it's often me, the donor, and the financial advisor or the estate planning attorney in the room hashing out the possibilities. And I defer obviously to them for tax benefits and things like that. I know enough to be dangerous, and I try to keep myself informed and educated, but it is not a reason not to promote planned gifts.
Sure. So, absolutely. I know you've had some great success stories come out of your parishes. You had a couple of seven-figure gifts. Tell us about them.
Okay, so in December, early December, we get an email. It wasn't 2 lines long. It was basically, I'd like to leave my whole estate to the Diocese of Fort Worth. Would somebody call me back? I mean, it was that short. And excuse me, the man, now that we know him really well, it's like, that's how he is, a man of few words, just short and to the point. And so, of course, and I didn't make the initial call. I have I call him a major gift officer, but technically he's planned gifts, whatever you need to follow up on a lead. And he got with this guy, never been married. He had come into an estate bequest. He's probably currently got about $4 million in assets. He wanted to leave it 100% to the diocese, which was surprising to us because we thought surely some for the parish. And so when we got into the conversations with him and asked him what led to this, our bishop had been to the parish multiple times, not just for confirmations. He'd go and say Mass on a Sunday. He liked his homilies. He liked what he had to say. He believed that this bishop and his successors would always know best what the priorities and what the needs would be. And for that reason, he wanted it to give, all of it ended up coming to fund our annual diocesan appeal, because the annual diocesan appeal is the priorities of the bishop at any moment in time. And so that turned into, he within a week had reworked every bank account, insurance policy, everything he had, structured it where it was set up to us. And then he did do, like I mentioned earlier, funded a $10,000 endowment to open it that spells out that all his proceeds are for the priorities of the bishop as defined by the annual diocesan appeal. So that will be certainly a transformative gift based on the age of the guy and, our looking at things. There's the potential that when this comes through, it's going to be about a $10 million gift to the annual diocesan appeal. And that, as I said, that'll be a transformational gift. Significant impact.
And what a beautiful way. Having, for those donors who give to the annual appeal every year, it's something that's important to them, and they want to continue, those ministries after their death. It's a great cause and an easy one, I think, for a lot of people to include in their estate plans. So it makes great sense.
But I was just really impressed that it was the trust in the bishop.
Yeah.
And, a lot of our good Catholic faithful donors, they get that, they understand that there's all these hot buttons here or there, but the key issues and the key priorities, our bishops are our leaders. They're the successors of the apostles, and we must trust in them, not just today, but 30, 40 years from now, and even after I'm gone. And that's a really important factor when you're making a bequest, because this is a gift that's going to keep on giving forever and ever and ever after you're gone, depending on how well you've managed it. Now, if it's, $1,000 and it goes straight to my parish and they pay a bill with $1,000, they may never memorialize you. That's a shame. I try to work with parishes to do things to permanently recognize those who make these kind of gifts. But that's important. They're considering us a part of their family, and we need to treat them like family and treat them with respect.
Without a doubt. And you had another big 7-figure gift come in as well.
Okay, this one was just last week, and this one I give credit to a pastor. So I mentioned earlier, we send our parishes lots of resource materials. They have all kinds of flyers. They have estate brochures in their brochure racks that drive people to us. But we also send them, I call them bulletin blurbs, if you will, little short paragraphs on different topics, everything from charitable gift annuities to bequests or beneficiary designations, stock gifts, all those kinds of things. And I suggest to the parishes, and I send them on a fairly regular basis, refresh them with new content. But I said, have at least something in your bulletin every week, not the same thing, but kind of rotate and keep it fresh. Well, this one little parish in Arlington, Texas, and they're a very good stewardship parish. It should come as no surprise. They're very good about everything they do on comment cards. Please have someone contact me about making provisions for the parish in my estate plan. But they took these various bulletin announcements and they modified them into a real pretty Word document and put a border around it and put their parish logo and inserted it in the bulletin. And through that, about 10 leads surfaced. And Monsignor Pemberton over there called me and he said, we have these leads. What do we do with them now? I said, well, that's what will come into play. And so I said, how about this, Father? How about you send a letter? And I composed the letter for him. He sent the letter to all the people. And he said, thank you for your interest. I would like to introduce you to, and if you're willing to have a cup of coffee or discuss this further, well, then that's when me and my major gifts officer, we follow up. And a lot of those leads are still active. But just this last week, one of those ladies who you would have never in a million years thought she had this kind of money, but her situation, no kids, never married, her only 2 people she needed to cover in her life were a brother who's in advanced Alzheimer's and is likely to pass soon, and then a mother who is actually close to death as well. And so she has already redrawn her will that 100% after, assuming she passes after these other 2 people, 100% is going to go to this parish. And current value of that is, and she's already put the beneficiary designation on the portfolio, is $1 million.
Wow.
And it wasn't that much work. And it wasn't like you might be sitting next to her in the pews and go, could she give $1 million to this church? Probably not. But after her death, she can, because a lot of this wealth is coming from retirement and from funds that you might need them now to live, but depending on when you pass, they're going to be substantial residual left.
Mm-hmm. Tremendous. You just never know, that single person, like you said, who no kids and just wanted to make a difference in the church. It's tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Yeah,
you
we
see
we
do you see a
counted
lot of folks coming through with using life insurances or leaving the church and with life insurance policies? Do you get a lot of those?
Yes, and that's a growing thing. You know, things get trendy about, oh, I'm giving through donor advised funds, or I'm giving this way, or I'm giving that way.
Yeah,
But we in this diocese have and I'm sure other dioceses do as well. We have a very respected Knights of Columbus insurance agency and
sure.
present Knights of Columbus, and they're partners with us in um, planting the seeds of planned giving through those policies. And we have and not only Knights of Columbus insurance, but predominantly that insurance, where people literally take out the policy for us and in our name, and then they just pay the premiums, and so that we're full beneficiaries. Some people are choosing a portion of the policy to benefit a spouse, for example. But I encounter a number of people in this very generous diocese who they've been raised and trained and believed in the tithe.
Hmm.
They don't open a new bank account. We know when the bank says, okay, who gets this? 10% to the church in their mind.
Hmm.
New life insurance policy, at least 10% to the church. And 10% of some of these pretty substantial policies can really be a lot. So we're just grateful that there are people who do that.
That's tremendous. I love the relationship you're talking about with the Knights of Columbus. That makes so much sense. Have you seen other dioceses doing the similar thing? Because you guys can work
You know,
together to really
I don't
help.
know. I do obviously a lot of networking with my counterparts in other dioceses.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, that's never come up, but I can't tell you how many times we, the Advancement Foundation, have been side by side at an event promoting planned giving.
Yeah.
Um, and I've got them to co-sponsor some planned giving events. We try to be really low key, low pressure, just plant the seeds, because my opinion is, and I feel this way about a lot of fundraising, is let people know the needs and the opportunities, listen to them, what their interests are, and they'll connect the dots. You
Hmm.
know, if I find out their passion is for seminary and education, we start talking that way. You
Right.
know, I'm not going to start pushing Catholic education down someone's throat. You can
Hmm.
always meet them where they're at and find out what their interests are, and then just grow the relationship. And it's not really high pressure. You know, people will always come to you and say, "I can't believe you asked people for money." I said, I can't think of, I don't really think of it as asking people for money. You know,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure you feel the same way in your book work.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, I was never one for the high pressure sales tactic. And sometimes I had colleagues who weren't in development, they worked in other departments, but they didn't quite understand the role. You know, they kind of thought of you more as a salesperson, almost as a used car salesman, to go in there and put the high pressure tactics on. But as you say, you said it beautifully. All development is about relationship building. It's about going on that journey with the donor and finding out what's important to them and helping them make sure that that is taken care of both during their lifetime and after their lifetime, and helping them to find opportunities to share their time, talent, and treasure, not just their treasure. So totally
Well,
agree.
and that kind of makes me think, you know, we'd had this conversation about the baby boomers earlier. Another fertile ground we're finding in planned giving in our parishes in this diocese, we've got a number of parishes that the largest givers in the are aging and slowly dying,
Mhm.
and those parishes are realizing, you know, we're not getting as many new younger families and getting the amounts of their gifts as quickly as our aging population is dying. And so we kind of have a little message out there that we talk about. We'll say, who will replace your weekly offertory to the parish after you're gone? Question mark, question mark.
Right.
You will.
Mhm.
And that's when we plant the seed of an endowment fund that they open, or a bequest that then could open a fund, and that the parish could receive income year after year after year after year after they're gone. And that's appealing to a lot of people.
Mhm.
Younger people don't so much want to talk about their mortality. People my age and older, we're realists. We know, and we're planning, and we're openly engaged in having those conversations. And it's far better to have these conversations now than at the funeral home, when somebody looks over at the kids and said, "Who should memorials go to
Mhm.
for mom?" And
Right.
the kids have no clue. If the parents are very intentional and they make these decisions known to their children and can get their children to talk about it, the kids will say, "Hey, I have no doubt it goes to the seminarian fund at the Diocese of Fort Worth," or whatever it may be. It's a shame if any of us who are living today let that opportunity go by. I ask my sons all the time, where does mom want her money to go? Of course, I have documents
Yeah.
on things, but I said, where do you want it to go? And boy, both my sons can recite it back to me. They know.
Right. I'm sure. I'm sure. And it's so important to have a will. So many Americans do not have last wills and testaments. My wife and I just redid ours a couple of years ago. And it's so important to set that up, especially for the kids and the families, so they don't have to question that. But you talk so much about the wonderful services that you provide to the parishes. If there's somebody listening now who maybe they're working for a parish, maybe they're just working for another kind of nonprofit, but they haven't really gotten started in planned giving, where would you suggest that they get started at?
Okay, well, every diocese is structured a little differently, but they
Hmm.
need to look at what resources are available to them in either their diocesan stewardship and development
Hmm.
department or their Catholic foundation,
Hmm.
because all of us do it differently, but there may be resources for them there. And
Hmm.
then, me, I'm on the board, I'm former executive committee. I am passionate about the International Catholic Stewardship Council. My first week on the job back in 2009, I had grant deadlines. I've never written a grant for the Catholic Church before. My second week on the job was the ICSC conference in Dallas. It changed
Wow.
my life. I met vendors and partners, strategic partners. I met colleagues doing what I did in other dioceses. They would find those parish people would find those same resources at that conference. And by getting involved, they just have to visit, it's catholicstewardship.com. And the conference is coming up in early October. And we're going to be in Anaheim this year. We're all looking forward. And it is worth your investment to be there if you're in parish or diocesan, volunteer or paid, stewardship, development, fundraising, capital campaigns. I can't say enough about the networking. And I know you go, Jim, so you might want to chime in here about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been going for over 20 years. Actually, I think my first conference was in Philadelphia sometime in the 90s when I was working at a parish as a youth
Oh,
minister.
I would love to go to Philadelphia.
So way back when, and then eventually as a consultant, I was there as a diocesan development director. I went for years and was one of the presenters, and changing our world. We will be there in Anaheim this year as one of the sponsors, and we'll be giving one of the talks. So I've met lifelong friends. When I was early in this work, I found a couple of great folks who were kind of mentoring me and helping me as I was figuring out the best strategy for a diocesan appeal or planned giving. I mean, the greatest form of flattery sometimes is plagiarism, and they're all happy to share what they do and how they do it. And we all just wanted each other to be
Yeah, we
successful.
kind
So
of tease and say the best ideas are recycled, but
yes,
specifically to plan gifts, and
yeah,
the trends more and more plan gifts. So you're going to find tracks
Yeah.
I think there's more than like 72 breakout sessions
Oh,
plus
yeah.
great plenary sessions, but you're going to find a lot focused in the area of plan giving, how to do plan giving in a small shop,
Hmm.
plan giving basic, and then more advanced topics in it. So I think it'd be a great resource for anybody wanting to know a little bit more. I will tell you, so these are secular organizations, but they've been real helpful to me. I'm involved in the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners. I'm a member of our local Fort Worth Lone Star chapter, and that's another really good organization to get involved in if you want to understand more about plan giving. And then the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP. Again, you'll be there with nonprofits of all kinds, not just Catholic, but they have a lot of great training, learning opportunities, and certainly mentoring and networking with plan giving. And those have been invaluable to me as I built out our program here in Fort Worth.
And you know what, Renee, if when we're done here, if you want to send me a couple of links, I can include those in the show notes of where people can find any of those organizations that you've mentioned, including the International Catholic Stewardship Conference and how they can register. Absolutely.
I'll send you the links. That's great.
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up here, just tell me a little bit about, I should have done this at the beginning, but tell us a little bit about the Diocese of Fort Worth. I have driven through Fort Worth when I had we did the long drive when I was a kid. We lived in Central Florida and we drove all the way back to my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. So I know how long the state of Texas is and I know how hot it gets, but tell me a little bit about Fort Worth. What's happening there?
Well, like most of the dioceses in Texas, we're rapidly growing.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I think Fort Worth's in the top 10 fastest growing cities in the United States. We tend to get blended in DFW or Dallas, but the Diocese of Dallas split into two dioceses, Dallas and Fort Worth, 54 years ago now. And in a lot of ways, Fort Worth got a lot of the better real estate in that deal. A lot of growth in North Central Texas is taking place in our diocese. We cover 28 counties, more than 1.3 million self-identified Catholics. We've got a very robust Catholic Charities here that is one of the most respected in the nation. Bishop Michael Olson is our bishop. He's been our bishop since 2014. He's really grown our seminarian program. We're getting a lot more homegrown priests. Last year, we were fortunate to ordain the most priests at any one ordination, with 6. And so we're getting newer, younger guys. They're just on fire. And so it's a lot of energy, a lot of new ideas. We do things differently than most dioceses do, particularly even in our fundraising efforts, how we approach it and how we're structured. But it's just great opportunity out here, and the people are good. I will tell you, we've got a large percentage of Hispanic, which as most Texas dioceses do. But Fort Worth and Arlington, which is home of the Dallas Cowboys and the Texas Rangers, and that's a big city in our diocese. They were probably one of the biggest resettlement locations for Vietnamese following the fall of Saigon.
Wow.
And we have an extensive Vietnamese population within our diocese, even more so than Dallas Diocese does. A number of our priests, we've got quite a few Vietnamese parishes. We translate everything into those 3 languages. We also have a good Korean presence. But it's a diverse people culturally, but very, very tied to their Catholic faith and generous and it's been a pleasure. I've lived here 5 years now. It was hard to move here from Lubbock. I've lived in Lubbock 42 years, which Mission Diocese, and I love that parish or that diocese as well. But
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, so we just absolutely loved it.
great.
Loved the area years ago. So thank you so much for Renee for being on our show today. We're so grateful for all the wisdom that you shared. And for those who are listening, I will put Renee's contact information in the show notes. So if you have any follow-up questions to her, I'm sure Renee, you'd be open to hearing from folks. And we're looking forward to seeing you at ICSC in the fall and with all of our other colleagues. So
Absolutely. Thank you for all you're doing here. This is a wonderful ministry.
oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Have a great weekend.
You too. God bless.
God bless.